My stepsons said I had no right to tell them what to do. I cut off the internet, sold the cars under my name, and handed their mother every outstanding debt. She learned quickly what no rights really meant. I'm 43, old enough to have lost my illusions, but foolish enough to chase one more. When I married Hannah, I told myself I was building something from the ruins. Not a marriage, not a patchwork family, but a kind of resurrection. She had 2 sons, Kevin, 16, and Lucas, 14. Boys with their father's bones but their mother's bitterness. The man himself had disappeared when Lucas was 5. No alimony, no visits, no calls. A ghost that still occupied every corner of her life. When we met, Hannah was working 2 jobs, moving between apartments every year, trying to outrun the exhaustion that clung to her. I admired her for that, for how she endured. I mistook endurance for strength. I mistook survival for virtue. When she said she wanted stability, I gave her mine. I bought the house in Atlanta. Pale siding, a front porch that faced west so the sunset would wash over it each evening. I furnished every room like I was filling an emptiness. New couches, new appliances, even new curtains she never bothered to draw. 2 cars in the driveway, both under my name. A full fridge, full closets, full promise. I thought that's what love meant, to replace what life had taken from her. Her sons didn't see it that way. Kevin carried himself like a soldier returned from a war no one else remembered. Always on guard. He spoke with that slow, deliberate tone teenage boys use when they're testing authority, waiting for weakness. Lucas was quieter but crueler in small ways. A rolled eye, a smirk, a silence that lasted just long enough to humiliate. At dinner, I'd try to start a conversation. How was school? Fine. Anything happened today? No. Then silence. Forks scraping against plates. Hannah would smile that weary smile, trying to smooth things over. They'll warm up, she'd whisper after. They just need time. Time. That was her word for everything she didn't want to confront. I kept believing her. Belief was easier than resentment. When we married, I promised myself I'd never be the kind of man who demanded gratitude. But there's something corrosive about being ignored inside your own home, about working 12-hour days to come back to the sound of laughter that stops the moment you enter the room. They called me by my first name. Never Dad, never Stepdad, just Mark, like a neighbor who overstayed his welcome. I remember one Sunday morning vividly. Sunlight streaming through the kitchen window, coffee cooling on the counter. I asked Kevin to mow the lawn. He didn't even look up from his phone. Mom said we can do it later. It's already later, I told him. He sighed, exasperated, like I was an inconvenience, then muttered, "You're not my dad." I stood there, coffee cup trembling in my hand, and realized that no matter how patient I'd been, no matter how many bills I paid or dinners I cooked, I'd always be an outsider. When I told Hannah, she brushed it off. "He's 16. You know how they are. Don't take it so seriously." But I did take it seriously. I took it like a blade through the ribs. That's how rejection works in a family. Not with shouting or open fights, but with slow, careful erasures. You start by being left out of small decisions. Then the laughter shifts when you walk in. Then your name gets spoken less and less, until even the sound of your own voice feels intrusive. Still, I tried. God help me, I tried. I drove Kevin to basketball practice, even when he wouldn't speak a word the whole ride. I helped Lucas with his science project, even though he submitted it under his father's name. I told myself patience was an act of love. Hannah said once, "You've saved us." I held on to that sentence like scripture. I repeated it when I lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling fan turning above our bed. I thought maybe if I kept giving, the warmth would return. But love can't grow in a house that doesn't want you. The night everything began to fracture, I came home from work later than usual. The air outside smelled like rain, and the streetlights had just started to hum. I turned into the driveway and saw Kevin and Lucas in front of the garage. Kevin had a basketball in his hands. Lucas was filming with his phone. They were laughing. Then Kevin threw the ball straight through the garage window. Glass exploded onto the driveway. I froze, stunned by the sound. When I shouted, Kevin turned, his smile fading into something colder. "What?" he said, voice flat. "Pick it up," I told him. "You're paying for that window." He snorted. "With what? Your money? Don't talk to me like that." He stepped closer. "You're not our dad. You don't get to tell us what to do." Lucas laughed. The phone kept recording. I can still see the reflection of my own face in that cracked glass. The look of a man realizing too late that everything he built was only borrowed. That night, Hannah told me to let it go. "They're kids," she said. "They're angry." "At what?" I asked. She didn't answer. Maybe she didn't know. Maybe she did. After that night, the house changed. The boys spoke to her in private tones I wasn't invited to hear. They'd whisper, stop when I entered, glance at each other and smirk. If I asked about chores or curfews, they'd defer to her. Mom said we don't have to, and she'd say nothing. The silence between us became a second language. I started noticing how she never used the word we anymore. It was always the boys and I, as if my existence had become an afterthought, a footnote in her home. I told myself it was just a phase, that every stepfamily had rough beginnings, that love takes time. But time isn't a healer. It's a mirror. And every day, I saw more clearly what I had refused to admit. They didn't want me there. Not the boys. Not even her. Still, I couldn't bring myself to hate them. I just began to withdraw small, invisible acts of retreat. I stayed later at work, ate dinner after they'd gone to bed, spent weekends fixing things that didn't need fixing. Felt easier than pretending. One night, around midnight, I stood in the hallway outside their rooms. Kevin's door was open just enough for light from his phone to spill out. I heard his voice. "He's such a joke," he whispered. "Mom only married him for the house." I waited for Lucas to disagree. He didn't. He just said, "Yeah." That was the first time I realized the truth. Hannah hadn't corrected them because she believed it too. The next morning, I couldn't look at her the same way. Her face still beautiful in that tired, familiar way, but now I saw the calculation beneath it. She'd built a life on the illusion of independence, and I was just the scaffolding. She smiled as she poured her coffee. "You okay?" "Fine," I said, but something had shifted, quiet, irreversible. From then on, every small act of defiance from her sons wasn't just teenage rebellion. It was inheritance. They were living proof of something she taught them when I wasn't listening. That I helped, but I didn't belong. That I paid, but I didn't rule. That I gave, but I had no claim. And once that belief takes root in a house, no love can grow there. I used to think home was where you give everything without keeping score. But now I understand home is where your absence is noticed. And in that house, mine never would be. That was the beginning, the first crack. The moment I realized I'd built a family that would never call me their own. I used to think betrayal was loud, that it came with shouting, slammed doors, and a final, terrible clarity. But the truth is quieter. It sounds like a woman agreeing with you to your face and undoing you behind your back. It started with the small things. I'd set a curfew, and the boys would come home hours late. When I asked where they'd been, Kevin would shrug. Mom said it was fine. When I told Lucas to take the trash out before school, he'd glance toward the kitchen. Mom said she'd do it later. Every rule I made evaporated in her mouth. I tried to talk to Hannah, gently at first. "You can't keep contradicting me," I said one night after the boys had gone to bed. She was brushing her hair, standing in front of the mirror. She didn't even turn around. "I'm not contradicting you. I'm just not enforcing things that don't matter. They matter to me." She met my reflection in the mirror then, her eyes cold. "That's the problem, Mark. Everything matters to you." It was such a simple line, but it lodged itself in me like a nail. I started to notice how her tone changed around the boys. Light, indulgent, almost flirtatious. She spoke to them like co-conspirators, as if I were some bureaucrat of discipline they had to collectively outsmart. Once I overheard her say, "He means well, but he's not your father. Don't take it so seriously." Those words rewired the house. They were poison whispered into their ears, drop by drop, until respect became something optional. From then on, I stopped being a partner. I became a provider, a wallet with a pulse. Bills kept arriving and I kept paying. Groceries, insurance, phone plans, the loan for the house she told everyone she had bought. Every expense fell to me, and still I heard her voice behind closed doors saying, "He helps, but he doesn't make the rules." I can't describe the loneliness of hearing your own generosity turned into something pathetic. At work, people called me reliable. At home, I was invisible. The tension bled into everything. Meals became silent performances. Her on one side of the table, the boys on the other, a wall of unspoken judgment between us. If I spoke, they looked to her first. If she smiled, they followed her lead. It was like watching a small army wait for orders. The night it all broke began like any other. Kevin came home late again. Past midnight, his car music still thumping even after he turned off the engine. I was waiting in the living room. The clock ticked louder than my breathing. "Where have you been?" I asked. "Out." "Doing what?" He smirked. "Living." Something inside me went cold. "You're grounded," I said quietly. He laughed. Actually laughed. As if I told a joke. "You can't ground me. Mom said I could go." I didn't raise my voice. I just said, "Then your mother can pay for the gas you burned." He stepped closer. "Don't talk to her like that." "Like what?" "Like you're in charge." Before I could answer, Hannah appeared at the top of the stairs, hair messy, robe pulled tight. "What's going on?" she demanded. "Your son. He's tired." She cut me off. "Let him sleep. We'll talk in the morning." "There's nothing to talk about." Enough, Mark." Her voice was sharp now. "You're too strict. They've been through enough." That was it. That was the moment she finally said out loud what she'd been teaching them in whispers, that my effort was cruelty, my rules were oppression, and my presence was temporary. Kevin smirked at me again, victory glinting in his eyes. "Told you," he said, and walked upstairs. I stood there, staring at the empty staircase, and realized I was the only one still pretending this was a family. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the kitchen with a glass of bourbon, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the house. Every bill, every receipt, every proof of my devotion spread across the table like evidence in a trial I was losing. Hannah came down around 3. She looked tired but not guilty, just done. "You're making this harder than it has to be," she said. I laughed. A dry, humorless sound. "Harder for who?" "For all of us." "Then make it easier," I said. "Tell them I'm their stepfather. Tell them I matter." She hesitated, then shook her head. "You're not their father, Mark. You never will be. Stop trying." The strange, the things you remember in moments like that. The color of her robe blue. The way the kitchen light made her skin look like glass. The smell of rain outside. And the absolute stillness in me, like a pond after the last ripple fades. I realized she'd never loved me as a partner. She'd loved the safety I brought. The quiet predictability. The roof that didn't leak. The full tank of gas. The insurance cards. The comfort of not being alone. Love had nothing to do with it. When she went back upstairs, I sat there until the bourbon was gone. Then I made my decision. By morning, I had a plan. I started with the internet, called the provider and canceled the service. Then I called the insurance company, removed her from the plan. Sold both cars, both registered under my name. When the buyers arrived, I handed them the keys with a strange calm, like a man finally finishing a long, painful chore. Next came the paperwork, the mortgage, the utilities, the credit cards I'd added her name to out of trust. I spent the whole day unraveling the web she'd spun, cutting every thread that tied her comfort to my labor. By evening, I left the house key on the kitchen table. Next to it, a single envelope. Inside, a note. "You were right. I'm not their father. But I was the one who paid for the life you called yours. Now you're really living without my rights." I walked out without looking back. Later that night, my phone rang. her number lighting the screen again and again. I didn't answer. I imagined the moment she realized what I'd done. The Wi-Fi dead, the cars gone, the bills arriving in her name, the mortgage statements showing my signature had vanished. Some men leave out of anger. I left out of clarity. By the next morning, the text started. How could you do this? You can't just abandon us. The boys are devastated. But I knew better. The boys weren't devastated. They were confused. They were seeing the world without the invisible man who had kept it spinning. Kevin messaged once. You think this makes you a man? I didn't reply. Lucas sent just 2 words. You're pathetic. They still didn't understand. To them, I was just a service that had stopped working. I rented a small apartment on the other side of town. 2 rooms, nothing special. The silence was heavier than I expected. I kept waiting for regret to arrive, but it never did. What came instead was relief. A week later, I checked the mailbox. 3 envelopes from the bank, overdraft notices. All in Hannah's name. I imagined her at the kitchen table, her face pale as she realized what independence really costs. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. It just balances the scales. And in that balance, I finally found peace. Not the kind that forgives, but the kind that doesn't care anymore. Silence has a sound. It's not absence, it's weight. It presses on your ribs, fills the rooms you left behind, hums faintly in the spaces where voices used to live. That's what the first week felt like after I left. The weight of a house learning how to breathe without me. I expected rage, or begging, but mostly there was chaos. On the second day, I got an email from the electric company. The account, once in my name, was now delinquent. I smiled. They'd learn quickly what real independence costs. By the third day, Hannah called from an unfamiliar number. I didn't pick up. The voicemail was short, her voice trembling but still proud. You made your point. You've hurt them enough. Come home. I replayed it once, not for nostalgia, but to study her tone. There was no apology in it, only command. She still thought I was a resource, not a man. Then came Kevin's text. School kicked me out. Happy now? I didn't answer. A minute later, another message. You ruined everything. I put the phone face down. It was strange. How quickly their contempt turned into dependency once the lights dimmed and the bills piled. Maybe that's what truth does. It strips people down to the shape of their need. I went back to work. Same office, same desk, same men who joked about golf and inflation. But something in me had changed. I used to count the hours until I could go home. Now home was just a word that meant nowhere. I stayed late, worked quietly, drank coffee that tasted like purpose. By the end of that week, the first real storm hit. Kevin showed up at my apartment. No warning. He must have gotten the address from the insurance paperwork I'd left behind. He looked thinner, angrier. His hair unwashed, eyes hollowed out by sleepless nights. What do you want? I asked. He shoved a piece of paper toward me. A school suspension notice. They said I can't come back until Mom pays the tuition. You did this. No, I said. Your mother did this when she taught you I had no right to tell you anything. He laughed, sharp, bitter. You think you're some kind of hero? You're pathetic. You're punishing kids for what she said. Kids? I asked quietly. You're 17, Kevin. Old enough to call a man worthless. Old enough to live with the echo of that choice. His face flushed red. You think we needed you? I nodded slowly. No, I think you needed to believe you didn't. He turned, slammed the door behind him. The sound echoed down the hallway, and I realized something unsettling. I didn't feel anger, only relief. That night, I sat by the window with a glass of whiskey, watching the city lights blur. I kept wondering if they were eating dinner in that house, or arguing or pretending nothing had changed. I imagined Hannah pacing, bills spread out, the boys shouting in the background. Maybe Kevin was telling her to call me again. Maybe she refused out of pride. Maybe she'd break soon. On the 5th night, the phone rang again. A different number this time. The voice on the other end startled me. Mark? This is Mike. It took a second for the name to register. Mike, the father who had vanished a decade ago. The ghost. He cleared his throat awkwardly. Heard you were there for them. For Hannah. For the boys. Thanks, man. I laughed. Couldn't help it. The sound startled even me. The one who ran away is thanking the one who stayed. He hesitated. Yeah, well, guess I owe you that much. They called me last week. Said things were rough. They called you? Yeah. Wanted help. I told them I didn't have much. Of course he didn't. That was always his gift, the art of absence. He kept talking, something about regret, about time slipping away. I barely listened. All I could think was how strange it felt to be thanked by the man whose ghost had haunted every argument, every silence, every act of disrespect in that house. After we hung up, I stared at the phone for a long time. For years, I'd been compared to him unfavorably, of course. He was the real dad, the myth, the one who could do no wrong because he never stayed long enough to prove otherwise. And now here he was, broke and apologetic. His sons begging him for help he couldn't give. That irony was almost beautiful. Over the next few days, the consequences began to settle in like dust. Hannah started posting online. Pictures of the boys looking sad. Captions about betrayal and cruelty. My husband walked out. One read. He left us with nothing. I didn't comment. I didn't defend myself. People who knew us, real friends, not her audience, reached out quietly. They'd seen how I worked, how I'd given everything. They knew the truth. Still, there was a strange emptiness in seeing my name dragged through her digital grief. Once I might have cared. Now it just confirmed what I already understood. She needed a villain more than she'd ever needed a husband. A week after that, Lucas sent an email. Short, hesitant. The subject line? I don't know why you left. He wrote about the chaos at home, about Kevin yelling, about their mother crying in the kitchen at night. She says you ruined us, he wrote. But I think she ruined you first. It was the first honest sentence anyone from that house had ever given me. I didn't reply right away. I read the message over and over, searching for manipulation, for guilt. But there was something different in his tone. Not forgiveness, just confusion. He was too young to understand betrayal fully, but old enough to recognize when something once solid had collapsed. I wrote back 2 days later. Sometimes people mistake help for control. When I stopped helping, they called it cruelty. But what they're really missing isn't money. It's order. You'll understand that one day. He never responded, but I didn't need him to. That letter wasn't for him. It was for me, a line drawn between what I gave and what I would never give again. By the end of the month, debt collectors had started calling Hannah directly. The house was still under her name now, the mortgage payment overdue. She called me again late one night. Her voice was thinner this time, stripped of pride. They're falling apart, she whispered. Kevin's skipping school. Lucas barely talks. Please, Mark. I'm asking you as a person, not as a wife. Just help us get back on our feet. I didn't say anything for a long time. The silence must have scared her. She started crying softly. You said I wasn't their father, I finally said. So I'm not. Then I hung up. After that, the calls stopped. The strange, how quiet the world becomes when you stop saving people who never wanted saving. You start to hear things again. The wind through open windows, the hum of a city at night, the steady rhythm of your own breathing. Feels like recovery. One morning, I woke before dawn. The sky outside was gray, the kind of color that looks like forgiveness but isn't. I made coffee, sat by the window, and thought about everything I'd lost, and everything I'd finally reclaimed. They thought I'd left to punish them. But punishment implies care. What I felt now wasn't anger. It was indifference, the final stage of love gone cold. Maybe one day, when the debts crush her and the boys drift away from the house that was never really theirs, Hannah will remember the quiet man who kept it standing. Maybe she'll think of me when she realizes stability isn't free and loyalty can't be borrowed. But I won't be there to hear it, because I've learned something that only pain can teach. If a family tells you that you have no rights, believe them and take back everything those rights once paid for. That's not revenge. That's balance. A month passed before the letter arrived. Handwritten. folded neatly into an envelope that looked like it had been handled too carefully, as if its sender believed the right kind of folding might erase what was inside. The return address was familiar, the house in Atlanta. The house that wasn't really mine, though every beam and brick had once been paid for by my name. Inside, a single sheet of lined paper. Lucas's handwriting, uneven, careful, the kind of script that still stumbles between childhood and something heavier. He wrote that he understood now, that he'd gone through the drawers, seen the receipts, the mortgage statements, the tuition records, all of it under my name. He said his mother had lied, that she'd told them she paid for everything, that she'd painted me as strict, controlling, a man who used money to buy obedience. He said he missed me, that he wished he could fix things. For a long time, I just stared at the letter. It felt like a ghost had written it, a small voice from a place I'd already buried. I read it 3 times, each line slower than the last, until my eyes blurred and the words lost shape. Then I folded it carefully and set it aside. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just felt tired, because understanding comes too late when respect has already died. That night, I sat by the window of my small apartment. The city hummed below, 1,000 stories moving without me. I thought about the life I'd built and the one I'd left behind. How both were mine, and neither belonged to me anymore. I poured a drink and stared at my reflection in the glass. A man stripped of everything that once defined him: husband, stepfather, provider. All those titles had dissolved, leaving behind something quieter, something truer. For years, I believed sacrifice could buy belonging. I thought if I gave enough money, time, patience, the walls of that house would start calling me family. But belonging isn't purchased. It's granted. And once you realize it's never going to be granted, every dollar you spent becomes a monument to your own blindness. Still, I couldn't hate them. Not even Hannah. Hate is too personal. It needs care to survive. What I felt now was distance, a clean, surgical cut between what I gave and what was taken. I drafted a reply to Lucas. Short, simple. Some things can't be fixed, but they can be understood. I mailed it the next morning and walked home through the early sunlight. The world looked strangely new, uninviting but honest. Weeks passed. No more calls. No more letters. Silence again. But this time it didn't weigh on me. It held me, like peace that had learned to keep its distance. I heard through a friend that Hannah had sold the house, couldn't keep up with the payments, moved into a smaller place near her sisters. Kevin had dropped out of school. Lucas was working part-time, saving for community college. The story made its way to me through whispers, but I didn't ask for details. I didn't need them. That family wasn't mine anymore. Their lessons were their own now. Sometimes I wonder if Hannah ever sits awake at night, remembering the comfort she mistook for permanence. Maybe she blames me. Maybe she tells herself I abandoned them. Maybe she still believes she was right, that I helped but didn't make the rules. If so, then the rules finally found her. I still see her face sometimes, though in the half-sleep between dreams. The way she looked that first year, grateful, warm, trusting me with everything she'd later resent. I think about how people confuse rescue with control, how love becomes another form of dependence, how easily generosity turns into guilt when it's refused. You can't save someone who needs you to be their excuse. One evening, I drove by the old neighborhood. Just once. Out of something that wasn't nostalgia. More like curiosity about a ghost town you once built yourself. The lawn was overgrown, the garage window still patched with cardboard. My reflection flickered across the windshield like a man visiting his own grave. I parked across the street and sat for a long time, watching the lights in the window flicker on. New family, maybe. New man, new kids, same story waiting to happen. I didn't feel jealousy, just recognition. Someone else had stepped into the pattern, thinking love could overwrite blood, that money could buy respect, that patience could bridge a silence carved by years of resentment. Maybe he'll last longer than I did. Maybe not. But I know how it ends. Because families like that don't change, they only rotate their saviors. I drove away without looking back. That night, I dreamed of the house again, only emptier. Furniture covered with sheets, walls echoing with the faint memory of laughter. I woke up before dawn, heart pounding, and realized something simple but final. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger needs an audience. I had none left. What I felt instead was clarity, the kind that hurts less but cuts deeper. I had mistaken endurance for love. I thought survival meant connection. But endurance only teaches you how much pain you're willing to tolerate before you call it virtue. Now I call it waste. Some nights, I still think about Lucas's letter, the fragile honesty of it, the way he reached across the distance trying to find the man he never truly saw. Maybe he'll remember me kindly one day. Maybe he'll grow into a man who understands that the one who stays deserves more than silence. But that's his journey, not mine. Mine ended the day I stopped financing their denial. People like to say that forgiveness is freedom. I don't agree. Freedom is the moment you realize you don't owe anyone understanding. I kept the letter, though, tucked in the top drawer beside the mortgage papers I never threw away. A reminder of what I built, what I lost, and what I finally learned. Sometimes I read it when the nights are too quiet, not out of longing but out of confirmation. Proof that I wasn't imagining it all. That the love I gave existed once, even if it wasn't enough to be returned. And when I finish reading, I always do the same thing. I fold it carefully, place it back in the drawer, close it gently, like sealing a coffin. Then I whisper the only truth that ever mattered. If someone tells you that you have no rights, believe them, and take everything you paid for those rights. Leave them with what's left. That's not cruelty. That's the only honest kind of love there is. The kind that ends when respect does. So tell me, was I wrong? Or did I just stop pretending that sacrifice means belonging?